For our text today, we go to the front of a book, Genesis chapter 6. Pardon me. We'll begin reading with verse 9 and read through verse 14. Genesis chapter 6, beginning with verse 9. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God, and Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. And may God bless the reading of his word this morning. But I saved verse 14 for last. I'm not going to read it now, but we're going to save it to the very end. And I do that for a reason, and hopefully you'll see that reason. We hear of the violence on our television and radios, and we read of the violence on our papers and on the internet. And when the violence takes place over in Afghanistan, Russia, China, France, it pops up on our screen for a moment, and then it pops right off. And then when we read and hear of violence in the Big Apple, the Windy City, Boston, Houston, LA, Miami, it pops up on our screen and it stays a little longer, but not very longer, and then it pops off. But then we read and hear of a man walking into a church just up the interstate at Nashville and start blowing people apart. And that pops up on our radar screen, and that stays a bit longer before it pops off. And then we have a young man killed just down the street at our local mini mart right here in Puryear. And that pops up on our radar screen, and it stays even longer before it flitters on off. And then we have a resident of our own county gunned down out at Las Vegas in that tragedy. And we watch his grieving widow throughout the week give her interviews. And that stays on our radar screen a lot longer, doesn't it? Before it goes off. My point is this, folks, be it far away or be it close by, be it people we don't know or people we do know, the radar screen of our world today is filled with violence. The globe of our world is covered and coated with violence. As I thought about this recently, I went back to the first time the word violence is used in the Bible. Now, this is not the first act of violence in the Bible. Brother Cain holds that dubious distinction. But this is the first time the word violence is used in the Bible. And from looking at these words in the day and time of Noah, we get a view of violence that still holds true today. Noah's radar screen and our radar screen is the same. So let's look at it now. We start our view of violence by looking at the decay that leads to violence. In both verse 11 and 12, the earth is described as being corrupt. That Hebrew word used there for corrupt literally means to be decayed and to be rotten. This is the first step that leads to the act and deed of violence. For it is this decay that gives rise to violence. This decay is at the root of our violence. And where is this decay, this rotten decay found today more than anywhere else? In the homes and in the families of our world. That's where it starts. The homes and the families in our world in general have become decayed and rotten. The morals, the ethics, the principles, and the values of many homes are decayed and rotten. The fabric, the fiber, the focus, and the foundation of many families is decayed and rotten. The structure, the strength, and the stability of many homes is decayed and rotten. The care and compassion, the love and the loyalty that belongs in a family, that should be found in a family more than anywhere else, has become decayed and rotten. The authority and the discipline in many families is decayed and rotten. The safety, the security, and the sanctity of many homes is decayed and rotten. And because of this rotten decay in our homes and families, this leads to the next step, which is death. The death is noted in the use of the word violence in both verse 11 and 13. You see, this decay, which starts in the home, it doesn't stay and remain in people, all closed and locked up. Eventually, that pressure cooker is going to explode. Eventually, that ticking time bomb is going to go off. Eventually, that dam is going to break. And the result is violence, death, mayhem, and murder. Now, this decay, which starts in the home, often plays itself out in the home. For the statistics show that in many people's lives, home's the most dangerous place they can be. The violence is carried out in the home in many cases, but that's not the only place. Violence is also carried out at work. It's carried out at school. It's carried out even at play. The violence may be carried out against individuals, or it may be carried out against large groups. It may be leveled at people we know or people who are total strangers. The violence may be carried out with a gun, a knife, a bomb, a plane, a truck, a car, or a poisonous substance. But that decay will sometime, someplace, some way ultimately lead to an act of violence and the loss of life. And then thirdly, we note the deluge of violence that's given to us here. Notice verse 11 and 13 says the earth was filled with violence, while verse 12 notes all flesh had corrupted their way. If they had had the media back then in the days of Noah, their newscast and broadcast would have looked and sounded just like ours, saturated with constant and continuous reports of acts of violence. Our regular programming of our ball games and soap operas and other things would be constantly interrupted with that headline, breaking news. And more times than not, that breaking news is about news of violence. As it was back then, so it is now. We have an epidemic and a plague of violence sweeping our world. Violence has become more common than the common cold, more contagious than a case of measles. Folks, we don't have a shower of violence in our world. We have a flood of violence. We don't have a storm moving through during the afternoon and nighttime and then moving on out. No, we have a constant hurricane, tornado, and tsunami of violence. We no longer have drips, drabs, and drops of violence. We have a deluge of violence. Our world has become the wild, wild west in terms of violence. Violence has become more American than apple pie and Chevrolet. And because it has, our country and our world is drowning in this deluge of violence. And where does this lead us to? Where does it take us? Our next point, the destruction. Look at God's verdict about their violence in verse 13. What does he say? I will destroy them. God had seen enough, heard enough, and had enough of man's violent ways. So their violence led to their destruction. And so it does, and so it will with all people, including us. You see, when people destroy their fellow man, they really destroy themselves. When people murder other people, they actually murder themselves. When people kill each other, they actually kill themselves. And that's what's happening all around our world. Nations are destroying themselves from within by killing each other off. Countries won't have to be wiped out by an invading foreign country. They'll wipe themselves out. This path of violence always winds up at the same place, the same address, at the end of a dead-end street. For when human life becomes cheap and worthless to the world no longer has hope, and the world will destroy itself. God won't even have to. We'll do it to ourselves. But folks, I got some good news. There is an answer. There's a solution to this problem of violence, and that's our next point, the deliverer. And now this is why I say verse 14. You see, God had an answer. God had a solution to their problem of violence. It's found in verse 14, and it was, of course, the ark. The ark. God had a deliverer. He had a rescuer. He had a solution and an answer to their problem of violence. And folks, God has an answer and a solution to our problem of violence. His name is Jesus Christ. You see, Jesus Christ is our ark. And he's our only ark. How many arks did God tell Noah to build? A fleet? An armada? 6, 4, 3, 2, 1. One. There was one ark that could save them from their violence, and there's one ark and only one ark that can save us from our violence. Jesus Christ. Here's what I fully believe with all my heart. And you can listen to what I'm about to say, or you can laugh at what I'm about to say. That's up to you. The only answer to our problem of violence is not more or less gun laws. It's not more education, more jobs. It's not more social programs or government grants. It's not more conferences or committees studying it. It's not more seminars studying it. The only answer to our problem of violence is Jesus Christ. He's the only answer. And here's why he's the only answer. When a person truly gives their life to Jesus Christ, that person will not commit an awful, maddening, crazy act of violence. Because when a person really gives their life to Jesus Christ, then Jesus lives in and through them. And Jesus does not go around committing acts of violence. You see, Jesus Christ is stronger than what we've talked about. He's stronger than the decay, the death, the deluge, the destruction. He's stronger than all that. So our problem is not, there's no solution to the violence. Here's our problem. So few people choose the solution. so few people really give their life to Jesus Christ. Look back then. How many people got on that ark? 8. I don't know how many people were living back then, but out of all the people living back then, 8 people got on the ark. But you know what? The percentage today of people getting on the ark is probably lower than that. And that's why we've got this epidemic of violence that's destroying our world. That's why this world is choking and bleeding to death on its violence. And that's why this world will continue to do so as long as it tries and turns to every solution but the only solution that will work. And his name is Jesus Christ. We're the problem. He's the solution. We're the question. He's the answer. And we can try anything or anyone else, but the only solution to our problem of violence is the carpenter from Nazareth, Jesus Christ. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.